So I've been doing Starship Start Here as sort of a joke with Photoshop mashups of Nova Scotia and science fiction stuff for 7 years now, and I've always sort of wanted to share sort of my work process and my thinking process around some of these pictures. I think the it's easy to overestimate the complexity, and it's also easy to underestimate the complexity, I think, and also, I think I've learned a lot of tricks. I'm not a trained artist in any particular way, but I've learned a lot of tricks on how to work with things and how to get the best impact out of the tools that I use, which are mostly Pixelmator on a mixture of the iPad Pro and just the native Mac app. And I don't use Photoshop. I just use Pixelmator, and you can get a huge amount of mileage out of Pixelmator, and it's actually pretty solid. It does a lot of the kind of stuff that you need from Photoshop without a lot of the extra details and technical stuff. So I thought I would just show you some of what I do, and this there's a nice idea I've had that's kind of timely and everything that sort of is a perfect idea for how Starshipsstarthere works and sort of its whole idea, its whole theme. And so what we have is there's an agave plant that's been at the Halifax public gardens in their greenhouses. And there's a regular agave, and the one in the middle is, you can see it's actually got this ridiculously crazy sprouting flower thing. Turns out these agaves flower about once every century, and this one is blowing up. And it's been a lot of back and forth because they brought it out, and then we had a cold spring, and so everyone was worried the agave had died, but clearly it hasn't. And this is a real big event that's going on. So this is kind of exciting. And of course, when you start thinking of plants doing weird things, you immediately start thinking of things like triffids from the day of the triffids, which are giant carnivorous plants. And of course, if you think carnivorous plants, the other one that's really popular is the Little Shop of Horrors plants, which I think is probably going to be better. I thought about doing a Triffid, but the thing is, it's a book, and nobody really knows exactly what Triffids look like. So I figured we could try something. Little Shop of Horrors also is wackier and funnier, and everyone knows it, and it's much more direct. And I think the whole point of Starship Start Here is to be, the ones I've done have been subtle, but the ones that have been worked best, because I have to make a really strong, immediate visual impact, I found. To really make the to cut through all the noise on the internet. So having a Little Shop of Horrors seems to be a much better idea than doing something more subtle with a Triffid, because frankly this plant's already weird looking enough. I don't think a Triffid's going to look all that much weirder. So, but a giant mouth screaming "feed me," that would probably be more useful. So I went down to the public gardens and took a bunch of pictures. And I never tried to. I tried, I'm often taking pictures as I go around town anyway. But I decided, it was a nice day, and I'd wander down and get some pictures of this. And I just took a bunch. And what I often try to do is take sort of really wide frame pictures, which I can then zoom into and crop into later as I try to get refined things. And mostly, I'm also using what are called live photos, which is an iOS thing where the photos are sort of animated for a few seconds before and after, which gives you many more options for picking something you actually want to use. So here's, and I like this one because it has in the corner, it's got the little public garden sign, and the thing's fairly centered, and the lighting is pretty good. Some of these had weird hazy light because the sun is right out of the frame. And this one's good because it's got people coming. Now I have to be careful with people. I've never wanted to really put people in who are identifiable with their faces forward, because it seems rude to use them without, didn't run around getting permission. I will use people with their backs to you, or maybe far off in the distance, especially if they're wearing sunglasses and things. But I don't like to have people really involved too much in these things. So, but I like to have people around because it can sort of add context to the picture. So this one's nice. This is probably the prettiest of the pictures. It's got lots of color and things like that, but we'll see how it goes. Actually, this one's even nicer. The color came out a little richer. Um, but let's see, here's one. This is one I like. It's got the guy there with the phone taking a picture of it. That'd be good comic impact to have this giant beast and he's just standing there to get a shot of it, which would be kind of fun. This one's good too. One thing I did note you have to sort of do is with the live photos is you can actually sort of, this was the original version of the photo, but if you move it around, like you want to make sure you want to get some of the photo taking, but you still want to get that sign that says public gardens, because these are often coming out of context from nowhere. People are getting this on the internet. You need to have a sign that says what it is. So to have it, say public gardens, that's always a good thing to punch it. This is great because there's somebody pointing. There's also a baby. Babies are always entertaining, especially when you're involving like a giant carnivorous beast. That's always a good combo to make sort of impact. So my thumb got in the way, but if we come down to here, we can set a good point. If we can get her pointing a little bit, we can always add a bit of extra pointing later. We can try to sort of figure out which is the best spot Then we'll obviously have the focus would be where she's pointing. That's always a good thing compositionally. You have something pointing, that really punches things up. So I'm going to move that to there. And so it's great. You can have these animated sets of pictures, and you can sort of really pick which bits you want to have. So my thumb got in the way again, but she's pointing up and then down. So maybe around there. I got several, and my phone sometimes stalls and then takes several pictures all at once. It's one of those weird memory things, I guess. There we go. So I'm gonna make that the key photo and say done. And then this, we had these people go by, but there's the kids being blocked. And even if we look at the other options here, I think this is probably, that's okay. But I think I'll just cancel that. And here's where we get the whole party. It was amazing. I suddenly, I started, it was empty, and suddenly it was really full of people. Let's just look at other options here and see if there's any other things that might be good. I think we've got a lot of people, but once again, we're seeing people's faces too much. The folks in the foreground are great because their faces are turned away. We see some of it in the parents, the parents in the back. You can sort of see who they are. So I'm not sure. I might use this one possibly. So once I've got a bunch of pictures, what I do is I'll then bring them into Pixelmator. There's various ways to do it, but what I like to do is just a simple copy and paste. So I'm going to take a bunch of these. So I'll take this one as I think the most compositionally interesting because of the pointing. And still got the sign in the corner. I just do a copy, and then I open up Pixelmator, and I just open that picture. So I can create image, and it automatically puts the copied picture into the clipboard, so I can just bring it right across. So that's kind of handy instead of doing complicated imports and cross-file saving and blah, blah, blah. There's our picture. Okay, so there you go. It's a little blurry, I'm finding, which is interesting. Oops. And that could be any number of things. Maybe it hasn't fully downloaded yet, or maybe it was just a blurry picture to start with. The screen recording software, of course, makes it a bit trickier. I'm going to try that again, maybe. But one other thing I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to show you where I get the source images. So I went to DuckDuckGo. I used to use Google Images a ton, but Google Images has changed a lot of their stuff to not let you just copy straight out of Google Images. And of course, I am copying and pasting. Because I'm remixing the pictures, I think it's less troublesome than obviously just like taking those and putting them into your advertising campaign or something. And here's a whole bunch of pictures of the plant, the crazy plant from Little Shop of Horrors. And these are great. I was maybe thinking this one might be good, but notice we're getting kind of, you know, it's getting kind of cramped. There's a lot going on in here. It's supposed to be a cramped picture with it against the ceiling, so the shadows are kind of weird. It's an indoor shot. I kind of ended up settling on this one, which is actually you can buy this as a plant, I guess, and bring it home and give it to people, which is kind of fun. And it's also got a nice even lighting, and it's fairly bright, and it's got a really good, clearly set up background, and it's fairly large. And it's off somebody's Pinterest account. So I'm just going to take that and I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to bring it over to here, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste it. And this is putting things into their own layers. I'm going to make it a bit bigger so it's easier to work with. And there we go. So now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to duplicate this. So we always have an original, and just hide that original. So I end up with very large files, but that's okay. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to zoom in a bit, and then I'm going to use Pixelmator. Has these great tools, selection tools. One of the great things about it is it has this really good quick selection, which basically uses color changes and edges to find things, and you just sort of wiggle over. And especially with this sort of flat gray background, it's just perfect. It's not so good with really busy backgrounds because it can't figure out the edges as readily. But in this kind of thing, it's almost ideal. And this little frond might not quite work, but that's okay. What nice thing with this picture is because it's going to be with a background that's pretty busy as well and similar. We're probably not going to have to worry about trying to trim lots of stuff out. And I'm not sure whether to keep these fronds in. I think I'm not going to. I thought about having the whole pot, but I think I'm not going to have the whole pot. Then I can do a quick selection, and I can do make sure it's subtracting from, and I can get rid of some of these extra bits here. The tricky bit with Pixelmator is if you don't do it right, it moves your selection when you're trying to limit the selection. You got to tap really lightly. I'm using the pencil, There we go. And make a big enough spot that you can then pull from. And I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what we've got, I'm going to copy it, deselect this, and then I'm going to, whoops, didn't mean to do that, delete. And we've already got an original we can work with, so I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to paste this in. So what we've got now is we have our plant, people are pointing at it, get a bit smaller, and there's the original agave, there's our thing. I'm going to get rid of the pot part because I don't think it's really necessary. And here's where the pencil comes in really handy. You can just erase right over the bits, and it's really good. You can just eyeball it. It has a little bit of, Pixelmator lets you get a bit of a blur on the pencil as you're going. So I can get rid of all of this stuff here. These fronds, I think, are not useful. And this orange stuff, but I might keep that bit of fern. Okay, so there we go. This works. Get this out, get this out, get this out. So now we have these colors. So we got some ferns, some other plants in there. Got some leaves. Maybe clear this out a little bit. Get rid of this stick. So this is good, and we might want to just limit sort of some of our detail because there's going to be lots of plants in the background anyway. We don't want to distract too much with, the point with sort of Starshipsstarthere is always to be punchy and make sure the punchline is really clear. I can add subtlety later, but at least the main idea has to be solid. And notice we've got a bit of some of the selection problem in the top corner, the top of its head. So I might have to tune that up again. I'm going to just do a freeform select before I've resized any. Whoops. I'm going to make sure I get this part of the forehead done. And copy. And hide this. And then paste. And just bring it over top where it used to be. And there's this weird selection thing iOS has decided to do. If you hold down a picture too long, it says, oh, do you want to copy and paste this? And it's like, no, I don't actually. I don't know why you're doing it. And it really messes up photo editing. It's been a real disaster, and I have no idea how to turn this off. It's a fiasco, to be honest. It's really terrible. But anyway, I'm able to get through this by putting that in place, deselect. Looks like it didn't quite match up. So now you got to do this nudging, and the pencil, and especially because Pixelmator sort of has this way of forcing it to be. There we go, and we can just smooth the edges with some erasing. Oops. And now here's where I start to screw everything up. Make it smaller. Good Lord. There we go. And just smooth that out. And smooth these out a bit. There we go. No one's going to look too closely at this, just so it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good to have something taken care of. And when in doubt, you can always smudge, so you can do the, just retouch this here, which gets the edges out. Maybe I could have done this differently, but that's okay. So there we go, that's close enough. At least we don't have a giant mess anymore. And we can just take this and drag it over to here and then merge. So now it's one thing. So there's our creature, and there's one of our pictures. So that's one set. So I basically just drag these together, merge them together, and there we go. That's one option. Now I go back over to the Photos app, whoops, and I take some of the other pictures. So there's this one, there's this one. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it, and then go back to Pixelmator, and I put this in as another layer. So it comes on top. And then I take this as well, and I put this in as another layer. So now we have two layers, and this would need to be flipped. So I can take this, and I go Format, and I flip horizontally. There we go. So that's kind of better. Now, there's some color mismatch. We'll work on that later once we get the positioning right. And there we go. We can put this in here. And you can see here sort of some of the idea that we might make. So this is kind of fun. Compositionally, I kind of like where this is going because it gives us the phone, the guy's picking the camera. I might try to do something about his face a little bit. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, it's a side shot. He's got sunglasses. I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's a big deal. So anyway, so there we go. There's two different options. So we hide this one. So let's go back to this and find another one. And this one's good because we got the little thing that says public gardens in it. So that might be fun as well. And it's got people's faces backed away, so you don't have to worry about, showing people off. So there we go. Let's try that one. And open this up. And we have the groups that you sort of move layers around. Copy, paste, and then take this, flip it again. Okay, that's kind of nice compositionally too. I think there's a sort of symmetry to the whole picture. And you see there's lots of leftover bits of crap in that. There we go. So this is coming together nicely. So what I tend to do here at this point is I sort of take a break and then see which ones feel good to me later on. So that's one thing I might try to do. But let me just pretend that I've taken a break, and just so we can at least keep going through, and you can hide that, see that one. That's really good, I think. It's a shame about it. If he was slightly further forward, we still have the sign that says public gardens, but at least you can sort of see that. This one's kind of fun. If we were to zoom in a bit and crop it and maybe not have the baby, because that would be, I don't want to be identifiable for that poor mom. But there's something like that. The pointing is good. We can maybe extend the finger a bit and maybe take this and, oops, I'm erasing. I always tend to forget which thing I'm doing. There we go. We can have it sort of coming down a bit. And I thought about having it down here, right, coming out of the agave, but I think having it sticking up on the little neck is kind of fun because it gives it more impact. And I think I thought about having it as small as a little thing at the top, but I think you need, I found with Starshipsstarthere, you really need to have as much impact as possible, so make it ridiculous. So there's, the mouth and everything is all pumping out. So that's a good one too. I'm really torn. So there's that. There's that. And there's that, which I think that's sort of got a nice classical composition because it's sort of centered and there's people looking at it in a certain way. I think this has a real dynamism. I think it's also one of the prettier ones with all the color from the background. All the other stuff going on in the picture. I can sort of tie this back a bit. There's a lot of other stuff we could include too. So that's one. I think that the background's a bit funny with the glare, but we can fix that. And then the last one is this with the pointing. I think though, take this and zoom it in a bit and go like this. This will give us a better framing. The only person you can sort of see is his mother in the bottom corner who is wearing sunglasses at least. So that's good. I think if we take it like this and make it more nice and big and dramatic, and maybe zoom this in a bit more so that there's a left to right focus on the page. So that's pretty good too. So I'm sort of torn now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on one of them and see how it works. What I think I'm going to try to do is I'm going to work on this one with the guy because I think it's got a lot of potential and I think it's dramatically kind of interesting. So I'm going to work on this one and keep the other ones available as options maybe down the line. So a bunch of things to do here. I'm going to make this nice and big. I'm going to have it coming out of here. I'm going to first, so a bunch of things that you need to do. So first is that there's a bit of glare in the picture. So I'm going to go in and do a bit of color correction on this. I'm going to hide this so it gets out of the way. So I'm going to go to here and we can do adjust colors. And I am not a master at any of this. I sort of twiddle and still until things work. But I find with this kind of thing, drop the brightness a bit, bring up the contrast. That will get rid of some of that glare. And you can even twiddle with this stuff here, which is usually a bit beyond me. But if you sort of do a little bit and see what happens, that's usually pretty good. You could even play with the little histogram down here, which is also not really my thing. But I want to sort of make it impactful rather than realistic. So we could even pump up I find pumping up the saturation and the contrast tends to work. Now, another thing is you want to sort of make sure that the plant has all the value, is sort of that's where the real action is. And so you want to make sure that it's sort of punches out of the picture without distracting from the rest of the image. So that's a trick. But anyway, there we go with this. I'm going to make this a little bigger. The rest of the bridge, no, we don't. So I'm just going to go like this. So now we have a real corner-to-corner kind of visual experience. And there we go. So I'm going to go to this and have the agave, have Seymour 2, I think, coming out of the agave. So there's a little neck, comes to here. And I'm going to have to clean this up a bit. So there we go. There we go. And then let's see. Now what's nice is it's background against background. But there's lots of weird little edge bits that just don't quite come together. So you have to sort of, especially you'll find, especially with coming out of images, you get a little bit of light at the edges of things. And I find just tracing over the edges with a pencil is really great. With a bit of a blur on the eraser, just to get rid of those will really help, because the light leak at the edge doesn't usually, it's part of the selection process, but it's not usually part of the real image. You can see all of these have a little bit of light leak. So you end up with a bit smaller of an image at the end. You maybe miss a few details, but that's okay. And you sort of just go through and retrace things. And you'll see that there's a bit of difference with and we're going to leave some of this out because who knows, you don't really notice that it's not part of that it's actually part of the real agave because it looks like some other plant. So I'm just going to clear out some of the edge of the mouth here. So some of the background stuff that did come through, just sort of trace around the edges and clean that up. And then you can start leaving some of the foliage, although the public gardens has plenty of foliage that's better because it's real, not some like planting fern. But that's okay. I'm gonna whoops. And undo is so my friend. I mean, some people are masters of this. I'm not. So undoing is really great. Some of this frondy stuff, I'm just gonna make this softer and bigger so I can sort of lightly remove the edges of the fronds without getting. I like these fronds here because they look kind of like arms, and I know the plant. In the movie, it's grunting and grabbing people. It's a shame they don't have more definition, so they're not as sharp. But things can happen. Things we can work on for that. So there we go. That's a pretty good start, and there we go. So. And so you can sort of see the neck comes up, and then we have these plants. So it sort of works. It's a little bit blurrier than the background picture, which is another thing that you can often do. So what I find, some people will downscale and then upscale again. I kind of like to just run the actual a very slight blur effect. So you can blur and just like 1% or something, 1, 2, 3. The thing's going to be a lower resolution anyway. And then another thing to make it more impactful is to give this a bit more of a lean, so it's coming forward. So that's good. Now there is the actual agave fronds in the back. I might just clear some of these out a little bit. So we use a retouch, and I find the clone tool is my friend. And you can just pick sort of some regular bit of background there, and oops, we're working on the picture, and just clear out some of the stuff. It's really easy to do, especially with a nice busy background like this. You can just twiddle with it and it pretty well disappears. So I'll get rid of this. I'll actually make this whole area up here actually kind of more forested than it really is. Okay, pretty clear. Nobody's going to notice. And there we go. So now we have ourselves, and we can even also sharpen up all of the plant a bit. I might do that here too. So I don't know, I can't tell the difference. Sometimes these are great, sometimes they aren't. Then I'm going to do some color adjustments and bring the contrast out of the plant and even more saturation. Once again, it has to be punchy. It's a tricky balance. You don't want it to look too wacky, but you want to sort of have it be. There's always a balance for me between realistic and punchy, and you know, at least we don't have, because it's sort of brightly lit. I mean, in theory, we'd have lots of sunlight highlights all on the top there, but at least it's not lit from one strong direction that's the wrong direction. You know, if it was coming in from the left with a really bright spotlight, that's one of the ways you can really tell. If you get to know, if you're looking for fake photos, look for where the sunlight goes. If I bring this up slightly, there you go. You can see more of the fronds. So there we go. So that's pretty good. And then I'm just going to then go over, and I always add the branding to the page, and that comes from here, which is just this flag I'd use. I adapted the Starshipsstarthere flag and added starships. It's funny when I look at the original now, it looks weird because I don't see the star thing at the top. So like it's kind of funny. But we go back out here, we stick this on. Well, there's nothing coming in. There we go. Oh, I see. Paste. I can either have it in this corner, but I think compositionally it works better in this corner as a balance. It used to be really huge, as a really huge part of the picture, and now I make it fairly small and innocuous. I don't want it to dominate, but I want it to still be there. I find having it in the corner is good, and I might do a bit more cropping on this, actually. My thought here, usually there's a point where I'll go away for a little bit and then come back. Um, and I'm also going to take these other ones that are blocking my way, and I'm going to move them down the stack. There we go. So now this is going to be easier to manipulate. So I'm just going to optionally take this whole thing, slide it down a bit. There we go. And then crop to something a bit more like this. Now there's no strict dimensions I use. I used to make sure it was like 3:2 because it had a slideshow thing going on. Okay, so that's punchier because it's a bit more compact. Maybe that's too compact, I can't tell. I can shrink the plant a bit now, be more dramatic, and make sure it's pointing at the guy. There we go. So I think that's pretty good. And I'm just going to do some erasing of random extra bits that might be around the edges that you notice when it pivots. There we go. And so that's pretty good. I think that works. It was pretty well. Do one more bit of erasing here. Just get rid of those phones because I think those are just getting in the way. And now we've got ourselves a picture. So I can take this. I didn't even have to go to the computer. Sometimes we have to use certain kinds of manipulations. But here we go. And now I can do a save it out to copy the photos. which gives me a new copy in my Photos app, which I can then find and export from my computer and then save to Twitter and whatever it is I need to. So there we go. There's a Starshipsstarthere picture.